Well, thank you all for coming. Can everyone hear me? Good? Okay. Thank you all for coming. It's obvious based on the cheers that you guys are here because you're patriots and you believe in what we do for a living, and I appreciate that. So, as Dave and Kev said, we were here for a weekend. We were doing a clay shoot, and it was all for the Special Forces Charitable Trust. And we spent a lot of time this weekend talking about Special Forces operators, what they sacrifice and what they do for the community and for our country. But we didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the families that support them. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background. I know there's a lot of former military in the crowd. That means there's a lot of former military spouses and probably children in the crowd. So you guys will understand this. It's important. Stories are very important in the military because that's how we get to know each other. We go from strangers to best friends in a very short period of time by telling stories. So I will say that I've been in the Army for 17 years. I am a criminal investigator. I have worked every type of crime you can imagine. If you've looked at my resume, then you see everything that I've worked. And I don't say that because I'm trying to talk myself up. I say that because I want you guys to understand that being the wife of a Green Beret is exponentially harder than what I do on a daily basis in my job. The reason for that is because most of the stuff that I deal with on a daily basis, although it's very traumatic and very awful, it is vicarious trauma. It's not my trauma. It's not my emotions. It's not my children's. It's not my spouse. It's not the people that I love. So when you have to deal with this as your own difficult situations, it's exponentially harder. So I entered the military in 2004 as a reservist. I soon became active duty within probably 10 months. And before I knew it, I found myself stationed at Fort Campbell and I was off to Afghanistan. I was in the middle of Afghanistan in 2007, early 2007, and I got stuck with a bunch of stupid Green Berets on a stupid mission, right? But I got stuck with my husband, actually on a mission in Afghanistan in 2006. And I was with him for about 2 weeks. We worked a mission together. And I will tell you that I had the unique opportunity to meet my husband as a Green Beret and as a special operator before I met him as a potential life partner or as the father of my children. And I will tell you that I was impressed at every turn. My husband spent 2 weeks making sure that my weapon was zeroed, making sure that I had the food and water that I needed, and making sure that I was trained to do the job we were about to do so that I could go home to the people that I loved and the people that loved me. This man didn't know me. I meant nothing to him. But he spent his every waking moment of that time making sure that I was safe and making sure that I had every tool that I needed to be prepared for what we were about to go into. And that made me fall in love with him. And that was the beginning of my life with him. A very short 2 months later, he was injured and he had to leave approximately 5 months before I left country. And for any of those who've been downrange, you understand that when people go back home, life goes on for them, but then every day is Groundhog Day when you're in a place like Iraq or Afghanistan. So when he left, he said, "I'll see you when you get home." And I said, "We'll see." Because I didn't know what the next 5 months were gonna be. And I didn't know what the next 5 months were gonna do to us. I barely knew him. But let me tell you something, folks. I came home 5 months later on February 10th of 2007. On February 13th, he got on his knee and gave me this ring. And 10 days later, we were married. I wish I could tell you that those 5 months were the hardest part of the last 15 years, but they were not. They were the easiest part of the last 15 years. So in the last 15 years, we've had 11 combat deployments between the two of us. We've given birth to 2 beautiful, healthy boys, 13 and 9. And we have been through multiple promotions, animals, PCS moves, deployments, and it has been a whirlwind. It has also been the most difficult experience of my life. This is really difficult for me to talk in front of people because I'm a cop and he's a Green Beret, and we don't spend a lot of time talking about the things we can't change. We don't spend a lot of time talking about the things that we're afraid of because that doesn't help. But I'm going to share a little bit with you guys because I think it's important for you to understand or even reminisce for those of you who've been where we are. So first, as a Special Forces wife, we carry the weight of what our husbands do, and we carry the weight of everything that they don't see and they aren't exposed to when they're deployed. We are daddy, we are baseball coaches, we are psychologists, we are doctors. We do our best to help our children understand why daddy's not here for birthdays, why daddy's not here for baseball games, why daddy's not here for career day, school. It's not because they don't love us. It's not because they don't want to be here. But how do you explain that to a 7-year-old? How do you explain that to a 10-year-old? My little one thought that daddy lived in my phone because that's where he saw him. I'm sorry. So we do our best, right? We do our best to explain the unexplainable to our kids. We do our best to explain to our families that everything's okay when we're not sure if it is, right? We do our best to avoid the television when the news is on because we know that there's nothing we can do about any of it. Then so I said 11 combat deployments. What 11 combat deployments means is that you spend 11 times with them being gone and then having to come home, right? So there's men in this room that have been injured in combat and they have suffered really bad injuries and this is, it's not to take away from that, but I will tell you that some of the biggest struggles that we have in the Special Forces family or just in the military in general is the wounds that you can't see, is the distance that's created between families when they're 8 and 10 and 12 months apart, right? I can't tell you how many Green Beret families have been broken up over the emotional scars of war and the emotional scars of just the distance that's created when you're so far away like that. Every time your husband comes home, you have to fight to find your way back to each other. You have to fight, find a place for them. You have to fight to find a place for them back in your family, to carve out that space that's been closed intentionally by you so that that void wasn't there while they were gone. You have to open that void back up and you have to let them back in. You have to show your children that they're the man of the house, that your 13-year-old is no longer the man of the house. And you have to explain to them that daddy's coming home even when you know that he might not. So here's the story, okay? So when my son, he was 8 years old on this most recent deployment. Obviously you guys heard from my husband when he was here last year, but he was in Iraq at that time, right? It was the time of the Hacksaw Ridge, right? Came out. And my son, my 8-year-old at the time, was absolutely obsessed with that movie. He watched it over and over and over again. He ran around in my backyard. I literally could not find a belt in my house for 6 months because everything was a tourniquet, right? So he was watching that movie and he came up to me and he said, Mommy, he said, a lot of soldiers died in the movie. And I said, yeah, and he's turned to me and I was not prepared for this. And he said, well, could Daddy die? And this was the most difficult question I think I'd ever been asked in my entire life, because a part of me wanted to lie to him. A part of me wanted to tell him, no, your daddy is invincible. He will never die. But we all know that that's not the truth. And then there was a part of me that could not bring myself to tell him that that was a possibility. He was so young. How could he possibly understand? How could he possibly sleep at night for the next 4 months? Sorry. Knowing that that was a possibility. But what I will tell you is the one benefit is that 8-year-olds have the attention span of a squirrel. So I quickly diverted his attention to something else. Thank God I'm a criminal investigator and I do this for a living, right? I completely diverted his attention and I avoided the question altogether, and he never asked me again. So thank God for those opportunities, right? Then I will tell you that there's the things that we as wives suffer through on our own, right? The being alone in our bed at night for months on end. Being lonely in our hearts. Listen, I know a lot of people in this day and age pretend on social media like they're Facebook happy and they're Facebook perfect, but let me tell you, I love my husband with every fiber of my being, and I can't imagine, I can't even breathe when I think about him not being in my life. So when he goes away, it is extremely difficult on me. I see very difficult things in my job every day, and I don't have somebody that I feel safe coming home and talking to about that, and that is really difficult. You feel lonely, you feel detached, you feel anxious, you feel exhausted emotionally, physically. You're doing everything all the time, and it's like a fine dance, and you're just waiting for the other ball to drop. So here's my difficult story. For me, when things get overwhelming, I have a tendency to have nightmares, okay? I know that that's when things are getting a little bit too much for me, right? I have a recurring nightmare. This recurring nightmare is that there's a birthday party at my house. It's for one of my kids. And everything's crazy and people are laughing and kids are running around. And in this dream, there's a knock at my door. It's the middle of the afternoon and I'm not expecting this, right? And I open the door and there are two very beautiful, picturesque Green Berets standing in my doorway. And they're wearing their Green Berets and they're in dress uniform. And I know what that means. And this is the most terrifying nightmare that I have, and I see nightmares at work every day. But the thought of losing my husband is absolutely the most terrifying thing that I can imagine. So I tell that dream to follow up with this story. This most recent deployment. I was in my bathrobe. I just got in the shower. I'd been at work all day long, okay? My doorbell rang. I was like getting a drink of water or something. I wasn't paying attention, right? And my doorbell rang. Now this was about 8:30 at night. And for those of you out here, we know that that's about 5 minutes after our bedtime, right? So nobody knocks on your door at 8:30 at night, right? So my doorbell rang at 8:30 at night. And I had literally had this dream the night before. And I knew knew in that moment that my husband was gone. I knew it. I knew it in the core of my soul that he was never coming home. And I walked to the door, and as I walked to the door, my head was pounding and my heart was racing. And I opened the door, and it was my neighbor, and he thought my dog was loose. My dog was not loose. And I very politely told him, no, both of my dogs were in the house. And I closed the door, and I absolutely fell apart. Me, the strong 17-year combat veteran, the CID agent, the felony level criminal investigator that had seen some of the worst things, right? I'd been a special forces wife for 15 years. And I absolutely fell apart at the idea that just for the moment that my husband wasn't there. And let me tell you, it all came down on me like a ton of bricks, because what I realized in that moment was there were women that had been their reality. There were mothers and sisters and children that got that knock, and it was real for them. That their soldier, their sailor, their SEAL, their Green Beret, their Marine was never coming home. And that was their new reality, and that is absolutely the most shattering thing that I have ever dealt with in my 17 years in the Army, in my 15 years as a Green Beret wife. It was that moment that I could not collect myself. I thank God every day that my children were already in bed, because it would have frightened them to see the way that I was. Sorry. I tell you all of that because I want you to know what it is to live this life. Not as a Green Beret, but as a wife, as a mother, as somebody who loves a soldier, as somebody who loves a Marine, as somebody who loves a Special Forces operator. This is the reality that they live in every day. But what I don't want you guys to do, I don't want to leave this on a bad note. What I will tell you is that it's all worth it. There is a saying, I love this saying, it actually hangs on my wall in my office, and it says, I never said that this was going to be easy, I said that it was going to be worth it. And that is probably the best quote to sum up what it means to be a loved one of a special operations individual. This lifestyle is worth it. I will tell you that all of the sad things that I've just told you about and all of the difficult times we've had have allowed my husband and I to have the most extraordinary life. It has allowed me to stand here in front of you and speak to you amazing patriots in Texas, a state that I'd never been to until I was invited to one of these events. It has given me the opportunity to kiss my husband for the first time on at least 10 different occasions. How many people can say that? A first kiss with your husband, 10 times I've had that. I'm able to show my children what it means to live a life of service. In both the job that I do and the job that my husband does, I get to lead through example for my children. I get to show them what it means to lead forward into adversity rather than shy away from it, which I feel is the way our society is going. The Army gave me my career, it gave me my passion, but Special Forces gave me the love of my life and gave me the father of my children. And I can never repay them for that. So I will take every lonely night, I will take every sad email, I will take every cry and every scary dream if it means that I get to live the life that I have been able to live. And I'm so glad that I was able to come here and share that with you guys. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you listening, and I love you all.